At 19, I thought I knew myself, until I met Jordan at Camp Pride. One summer, one stranger, and everything I thought I understood about love and courage turned upside down. The moment our eyes met, I felt it, a spark I couldn't ignore. But love isn't easy, especially when fear and doubt follow you everywhere. Join me on this journey of discovery, where a summer camp became the backdrop to a love story I'll never forget. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us for every twist, turn, and unforgettable moment of this story. The bus rumbled to a stop, and I gripped my backpack tightly, staring out the window at the sprawling green fields and rows of rustic cabins. Camp Pride wasn't what I had imagined. It was better. The banners hanging from the tall pine trees read, "Be you, fearlessly," and laughter echoed from a nearby lake. This was supposed to be my escape, a chance to be in a place where no one judged me, where I didn't have to pretend. But even as I stepped off the bus, the knot in my stomach tightened. What if I didn't fit in here either? "Hey, newbie," someone called, and I turned to see a cheerful camp counselor waving me over. "Welcome to Camp Pride. You must be Ryan." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, that's me." She handed me a lanyard with my name and cabin assignment. "You'll be in cabin 4. Head that way, and your cabin mates will help you settle in." Cabin 4 was smaller than I expected, with 6 bunks squeezed into a space that smelled faintly of pine and sunscreen. As I walked in, a few guys were unpacking, chatting easily like they'd known each other forever. "Yo, you must be the new guy," one of them said, grinning. "I'm Kevin, and that's where you'll be sleeping." He pointed to an empty bunk near the window. "Thanks," I said, dropping my bag. I was just starting to unpack when I felt someone watching me. "New guy, huh?" The voice was smooth, low, and confident. I turned to see him leaning casually against the doorframe. He was tall, with dark skin that seemed to glow in the sunlight filtering through the window. His short, neatly styled hair framed a face that was all sharp lines and soft eyes. "Yeah," I managed, my voice catching. "I'm Ryan." "Jordan," he said, stepping inside. His smile was easy, but there was something about his gaze that made me feel like he could see right through me. "First time at camp?" he asked, sitting on the edge of a bunk across from mine. "Yeah," I admitted, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Don't worry," Jordan said with a shrug. "It's pretty chill here. Just be yourself." If only it were that easy, I thought. The rest of the day passed in a blur of icebreakers, team activities, and awkward introductions. Everywhere I went, Jordan seemed to be nearby, laughing with others, effortlessly blending in. He was magnetic, the kind of person everyone gravitated toward. Later that evening, after the campfire, I found myself sitting on the steps of our cabin, staring at the stars. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Jordan. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting down beside me. "Not really," I admitted. "It's just a lot to take in." He nodded, looking up at the sky. "Yeah, it can be, but you'll get used to it." For a moment, we sat in silence, the cool night air wrapping around us. Then he turned to me, his expression serious. "You know," he said, his voice softer now. "This camp is special. It's a place where you don't have to hide. Whatever you're carrying, whatever you're afraid of, you can leave it behind here." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of my own fears was too heavy. "What if I don't know how?" I asked quietly. Jordan smiled, the kind of smile that made you feel like everything might actually be okay. "Then I'll help you figure it out." For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than fear. It was small, tentative, but it was there. Hope. The next morning, the camp was already buzzing with activity by the time I rolled out of bed. Sunlight poured through the window and I could hear the faint sounds of laughter and splashing coming from the lake. "Rise and shine, Ryan," Kevin called from across the cabin. "We've got kayaking this morning. Don't be late or Jordan will give you hell." I groaned, dragging myself out of bed. Kayaking wasn't exactly my thing, but I didn't want to start the day on the wrong foot. Besides, a small part of me looked forward to seeing Jordan again. At the lake, the counselors were organizing everyone into pairs. As fate, or bad luck, would have it, I was paired with Jordan. "Looks like it's you and me, rookie," he said with a smirk as he handed me a life jacket. "Great," I muttered, trying to hide my nerves. We pushed the kayak into the water and I climbed in behind Jordan. The lake shimmered under the morning sun, the calm water reflecting the trees and sky. It should have been peaceful, but my heart was racing. "You okay back there?" Jordan asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Yeah, just trying not to flip us over," I replied, gripping the paddle tightly. Jordan chuckled. "Relax, man. Just follow my lead." As we paddled, the initial awkwardness began to fade. Jordan's easygoing nature made it hard to stay tense, and before I knew it, we were laughing as we raced the other pairs across the lake. "See?" Jordan said when we finally drifted to a stop near the shore. "You're not so bad at this." "Thanks, I guess," I said, trying to ignore the way his praise made my chest feel warm. He leaned back slightly, his arms resting on the edges of the kayak. "You know, you don't have to be so guarded all the time." I froze, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Jordan shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "You're always looking over your shoulder, like you're waiting for something bad to happen. But no one's judging you here, Ryan, not at this camp." His words hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I'd been carrying that fear for so long I didn't know how to let it go. "I guess it's just a habit," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Jordan didn't push, but the way he looked at me, like he understood more than I was saying, made me feel both vulnerable and safe. Later that evening, the camp organized a talent show. I wasn't planning to participate, but I ended up sitting near the stage, watching as campers performed everything from bangs to comedy routines. When Jordan's name was called, I sat up a little straighter. He walked onto the stage with a guitar slung over his shoulder, his confidence lighting up the room. "This one's for anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong," he said, his voice steady but warm. As he played, his voice filled the room, raw and full of emotion. It wasn't just a performance, it was a window into who he was. I couldn't take my eyes off him, and for the first time I realized just how much he affected me. When the show ended, I found him outside, sitting on one of the picnic tables under the stars. "That was amazing," I said, walking over to him. "Thanks," he replied, looking up at me with a soft smile. I wasn't sure if anyone would get it. "I did," I said, sitting down beside him. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the silence between us filled with unspoken words. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice low. "Ryan, I think we're going to be good for each other," he said. His words sent a shiver down my spine, and for the first time I didn't feel the need to look away. The next few days passed in a blur of activities, but my focus kept drifting back to Jordan. Whether we were hiking, playing volleyball, or just sitting around the campfire, he always seemed to be nearby, his presence grounding yet electrifying. It was during an evening campfire that things began to shift again. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple as the sun set, and the counselors handed out marshmallows for s'mores. Laughter and chatter filled the air, but I couldn't concentrate on anything except the way Jordan's smile seemed to glow in the firelight. "Earth to Ryan," Jordan teased, nudging me with his shoulder. "You've been staring at that marshmallow for 5 minutes." I laughed awkwardly, trying to shake off my nerves. Just lost in thought. Jordan raised an eyebrow, his smirk softening into something more curious. "Anything you want to share?" I hesitated, the flickering flames reflecting in his dark eyes. There was so much I wanted to say, but the words felt trapped, buried under years of fear and self-doubt. "Not yet," I said finally. He didn't press, but the way he looked at me, patient, understanding, made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could let my guard down. Later that night, back in the cabin, I found myself sitting on my bunk, staring at the ceiling. The other guys had already fallen asleep, their soft snores filling the quiet room. I thought I was alone until I heard a whisper. "Can't sleep either?" I turned to see Jordan sitting up on his bunk, his silhouette outlined by the faint moonlight streaming through the window. "Not really," I admitted. He motioned for me to follow him, and without a word we slipped outside. The camp was silent, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. Jordan led me to a small clearing near the lake, where the water mirrored the stars above. "Sometimes it's easier to think out here," he said, sitting on the grass. I sat beside him, the cool earth grounding me. For a while, we just stared at the water, the silence between us comfortable. "You don't talk much about yourself," Jordan said eventually, his voice soft but steady. "There's not much to tell," I replied, though I knew it wasn't true. Jordan turned to look at me, his gaze unwavering. "I think there's more than you're letting on. But I get it, it's hard to open up." Something about his honesty, the way he didn't try to force anything, made me feel safe. "I'm not used to this," I admitted. "Being around someone who just gets it." Jordan smiled, a soft, understanding curve of his lips. Took me a long time to find that, too. But you don't have to figure it all out alone, you know. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I wanted to tell him everything, to let him in. But years of keeping myself hidden weren't easy to undo. Instead, I said, "Thanks, Jordan, for being patient." He reached out, his hand brushing against mine. The touch was brief, but it sent a spark through me, my breath hitching in my throat. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment we just sat there, the world around us fading away. Then he leaned closer, his hand resting lightly on mine. "Ryan," he said softly, "you don't have to be afraid with me." His words broke something open inside me, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "I'm trying," I said, my voice trembling. Jordan gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "That's all that matters." As the stars above us reflected on the lake, I realized that this, sitting here with him, feeling understood for the first time, was the beginning of something I didn't want to let go. The following day started like any other. Breakfast in the mess hall, group activities, and a steady buzz of excitement as campers prepared for the evening's big event, a night hike through the forest. But for me, the weight of last night's conversation with Jordan lingered like a quiet storm, brewing just beneath the surface. Jordan had been patient, understanding, and kind in a way that felt disarming. It terrified me as much as it thrilled me. What if I let him in completely, only to regret it later? "Ryan," a voice called, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Kevin, one of our cabin mates, grinning as he jogged up beside me. "You and Jordan seem pretty close these days." The comment was casual, but it sent my mind racing. Did people notice? Were we that obvious? Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's easy to talk to." Kevin nodded, oblivious to my inner panic. "Yeah, he's cool. Anyway, see you at the hike." I managed a weak smile as he walked away, but the encounter left me rattled. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a dusky glow, I was wound so tight I could barely focus on the hike. The counselors led us in groups, flashlights bobbing as we navigated the winding trails. Jordan walked beside me, his presence steady and reassuring. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the sound of crunching leaves. I nodded, even though it wasn't true. "Just tired." He didn't press, but his hand brushed against mine briefly as we walked. The simple touch sent a wave of warmth through me, and for a moment the tension eased. Halfway through the hike, a sudden clap of thunder rolled across the sky, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. The counselors quickly directed us back toward the camp, but in the chaos, Jordan and I got separated from the group. "Ryan!" Jordan called, his voice cutting through the storm. "Here!" I yelled, spotting him through the rain. We found shelter under a large tree, the branches offering some protection from the downpour. We were soaked, shivering, as the storm raged around us. "Great," I muttered, wiping rain from my face. "Just what we needed." Jordan laughed, his breath visible in the cold air. "It's kind of romantic, don't you think?" I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop the smile tugging at my lips. "Only you would find a storm romantic." He shrugged, his eyes sparkling even in the dim light. "It's all about perspective." For a moment, the storm seemed to fade into the background as we stood there, inches apart. The air between us felt charged, like the thunder had left its electricity behind. "Ryan," Jordan said softly, his voice steady despite the rain, "why are you so scared?" The question hit me like a lightning bolt. I opened my mouth to reply, but no words came out. He stepped closer, his hands resting lightly on my arms. "You don't have to be perfect, you know. You don't have to have all the answers." I looked at him, my defenses crumbling under the weight of his honesty. I don't want to mess this up," I admitted, my voice trembling. Jordan smiled, the kind of smile that felt like sunlight breaking through the clouds. "You won't. We'll figure it out together." Before I could second-guess myself, I closed the distance between us, my lips meeting his in a kiss that was as tentative as it was certain. The storm raged on around us, but in that moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. The storm had passed by the time we returned to camp, drenched and shivering but unable to stop glancing at each other with quiet smiles. The kiss lingered in my mind like a melody I couldn't forget, filling me with equal parts excitement and fear. We snuck into the cabin, careful not to wake the others. As I changed into dry clothes, I caught Jordan watching me from the corner of his bunk. His gaze wasn't intrusive. It was soft, curious, and filled with something I couldn't quite name. "Good night, Ryan," he said, his voice low and warm. "Good night, Jordan," I replied, my chest tightening as I turned off the light. The next morning, the camp felt different. The same activities were planned, the same cheerful buzz surrounded us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. As we walked to breakfast, Jordan fell into step beside me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice casual but laced with concern. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. But as we joined the other campers, I realized we weren't as subtle as I'd hoped. Kevin, who had always been friendly, gave me a knowing look as we sat down. "You two seem close," he remarked, smirking. My stomach flipped. "We're just friends," I said quickly, my voice sharper than I intended. Jordan's smile faltered, but he said nothing, focusing instead on his plate. The rest of the day was a blur of strained interactions and forced small talk. I felt like I was being watched, judged, and my instinct to retreat kicked in. By the time evening came, I couldn't avoid the tension any longer. "Ryan," Jordan said as we stood by the lake after dinner, the golden light of the setting sun reflecting off the water. "What's going on?" I hesitated, my heart pounding. "I don't know," I admitted, looking down at my hands. "Yes, you do," he said gently. "You're pulling away. Why?" His words stung because they were true. "I'm scared," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "What if this doesn't work? What if I ruin everything?" Jordan stepped closer, his expression calm but serious. "Ryan, nothing about this is perfect and it doesn't have to be. I'm not asking for forever, I'm just asking for right now." The simplicity of his words hit me harder than I expected. I looked at him, his eyes full of understanding and patience, and felt the weight of my fears start to lift. "But what if people—" I started, but he cut me off. "Let them think what they want," he said firmly. "This is about us, not them." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to overwhelm me. "I don't want to lose you," I said finally. "You won't," he replied, his hand brushing against mine. "Not unless you let this fear win." For the first time, I felt the courage to stand still, to face what I was feeling instead of running from it. "Okay," I said softly. "I want this. I want us." Jordan's smile returned, bright and unguarded. He reached out, lacing his fingers with mine. "Then let's figure it out together." As we stood there, the lake shimmering under the fading light, I realized that love wasn't about being fearless. It was about being brave enough to try despite the fear. The final week of camp arrived too quickly, each day slipping through our fingers like grains of sand. Jordan and I had settled into a rhythm, stolen moments by the lake, quiet conversations under the stars, and a growing certainty that this connection was worth the risk. But the fear of what came next loomed over us like a storm cloud. On the last full day of camp, the counselors organized a farewell bonfire. The entire camp gathered around the flames, sharing laughs, stories, and memories. Jordan and I sat side by side, our shoulders brushing, the warmth of the fire mirroring the heat between us. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low so only I could hear. "Yeah," I said, though my chest felt tight. He gave me a small reassuring smile. "Whatever happens after this, Ryan, you'll be okay. We'll be okay." His words gave me courage, but the moment didn't last. Kevin approached, a smirk on his face and a knowing glint in his eye. "So, what's going on with you two?" he asked, loud enough for nearby campers to hear. The air seemed to freeze. I felt the weight of every gaze on us, my stomach twisting in knots. "Nothing," I said quickly, my voice sharper than I intended. Jordan stiffened beside me, his expression unreadable. "It's not nothing," he said, his voice calm but firm. The campfire grew eerily quiet. All eyes were on us now, and my heart raced. "Jordan," I whispered, my voice pleading. But he didn't back down. "I'm not ashamed of how I feel," he said, his gaze locking onto mine. "And you shouldn't be either." The words hung in the air, and I felt a rush of emotions. Fear, anger, but most of all admiration for his courage. I started, but the words caught in my throat. Jordan stood, his voice steady. "It's okay to be scared, Ryan, but don't let fear stop you from living your truth." With that, he walked away, leaving me sitting there, the weight of his words sinking in. For a moment, I didn't move. Then, with a deep breath, I stood and followed him, ignoring the whispers and stares around me. I found him by the lake, the moonlight reflecting off the water. He was sitting on the dock, his shoulders tense. "Jordan," I said softly, sitting beside him. He didn't look at me. "You don't have to say anything, Ryan. I get it." "No," I said firmly, turning to face him. "You don't. I've been scared my whole life. Of what people would think. Of being different. But you make me want to be braver." Jordan finally met my gaze, his eyes softening. "I don't know what's going to happen after this," I admitted. "But I know I don't want to lose you." His lips curved into a small smile. "Then don't." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. The world seemed to fade away as we sat there, the water lapping gently against the dock. In that moment, I realized that love wasn't about perfection or certainty. It was about taking a chance, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. Love takes courage. Have you ever taken a risk for something, or someone you cared about? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories like this one.